There is a name that was torn from the pages of history, a name so powerful, so paradigm-shattering, that it had to be buried under 2,000 years of carefully constructed silence. It was a truth deemed too dangerous to survive, a light too brilliant for an age of encroaching shadows. But some truths are not written in ink and parchment, vulnerable to fire and the redaction of emperors. Some truths are carried in the blood, a sacred current flowing through generations, waiting for a time when the world is ready to remember. And now, in the quiet spaces of our collective soul, the whispers of that sacred lineage are returning, rising like a tide that no dogma can hold back. This is not just a story. It is a revelation waiting to be reclaimed. Imagine the sun-scorched earth of first-century Judea, a land simmering with rebellion, fervent with prophecy, and aching with a profound spiritual hunger. The official history, the one carved in stone and preached from pulpits, gives us a familiar narrative, a celestial Messiah, a divine Son surrounded by his chosen male disciples, who came to establish a kingdom not of this world. It is a story of spirit divorced from flesh, of a sacredness that transcends the messy, beautiful reality of human life. This is the version we were taught, the foundation upon which empires of faith were built. But beneath this polished, authorized account lies a shadow history, a story that flows like a hidden river, one that speaks not of separation, but of union. In the esoteric inner circles of that time, a different knowledge was shared. It was a wisdom whispered in moonlit groves and passed between those who sought not belief but direct experience, a gnosis of the divine. Ancient texts, scriptures that were systematically hunted, condemned as heresy, and set to the torch, tell of this other way. The Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, these are not the chronicles of a distant, untouchable God, but the surviving fragments of a forbidden light. They speak of a sacred partnership, a holy union between the masculine and feminine principles. They reveal Mary Magdalene not as a redeemed sinner, but as the companion, the one who understood the deepest teachings, the apostle to the apostles. This was the ancient tradition that had to be erased. For this sacred union was not merely symbolic. It was not a metaphor for a spiritual concept alone. It was real, it was embodied, and it bore fruit. From this partnership, a child was born, a daughter. Her name was Sarah, meaning princess in the Hebrew tongue, a quiet acknowledgement of a royal and spiritual bloodline. This is the truth so profound it could shatter empires and dismantle millennia of doctrine. The existence of Sarah meant that the divine was not an abstract force in the heavens, but a living flame that could be passed through the feminine, grounded in the earth, and carried forth in a lineage. It sanctified family, it honored the body, and it placed the sacred feminine at the heart of the Christian mystery. Why was the story of a son celebrated, but the story of a daughter buried so deep it became a legend? This forgotten legacy is not a relic of the past. It is a living memory stirring within us today. The erasure of Sarah created a wound in the collective consciousness, a spiritual imbalance that has haunted our world for centuries, leaving a void where wholeness should be. The whispers of her existence, surviving in the oral traditions of forgotten peoples and in the coded symbols of sacred art, are returning now for a reason. They call to that part of our soul that has always felt something was missing from the story. Our journey on this channel is to walk these hidden paths, to unearth the knowledge that was intentionally concealed, and to listen to the ancestral memory that is finally breaking its long silence. If the echo of this lost truth resonates within your soul, subscribe and join us as we venture into the heart of this sacred mystery. The remembering has begun. The air in first-century Judea was not still. It crackled with a potent energy, a mixture of sun-baked earth, whispered prophecies, and the raw, sacred hunger of a people yearning for a truth that could quench the thirst of the soul. This was a land of stark contrasts, where the polished stone of temples stood against the dusty roads traveled by mystics and rebels, and the rigid laws of orthodoxy were challenged by a current of direct, experiential knowledge. It is here, in this fertile ground of spiritual revolution, that the seeds of our mystery were sown. The official history speaks of a solitary Messiah, a celestial figure whose teachings were meant to lift humanity out of the world. But in the quiet groves and hidden gatherings, away from the gaze of Roman legionaries and temple priests, a different story was being lived. A story not of transcendence from the world, but of divinity made manifest within it. This hidden knowledge, this gnosis, was a sacred stream that flowed beneath the surface of the official narrative. It spoke of the universe as a divine dance between masculine and feminine energies, a perfect and necessary balance. Ancient texts, surviving embers of a vast fire set by those who feared their light, give us glimpses into this lost world. The Gospel of Philip does not speak of a master and his follower, but of a companion, using the Greek word koinonos, which implies a deep partnership, a spiritual and physical union. This companion was Mary Magdalene, the one who, according to the Gospel of Mary, understood the deepest teachings, the one to whom the resurrected Christ appeared first, entrusting her with a revelation too profound for the others to grasp. She was not a subordinate, she was the other half of a sacred whole, a hieros gamos, or sacred marriage, made real. What does it change? To see them not as teacher and student, but as divine counterparts. From this sacred ground, a new life bloomed, a life that would become the most guarded secret in history. A daughter was born, and her name was Sarah. In the Hebrew tongue, the name means princess, a quiet but potent acknowledgement of a lineage that was both royal and divine. The birth of Sarah was not merely a historical event, it was a cosmological one. It was the living proof that the divine was not an abstract concept in the heavens, but a living flame that could be passed through the feminine, grounded in the earth and carried forward in blood and bone. Her existence sanctified the body, honored the family, and placed the sacred feminine not at the margins of the story, but at its very heart. This was the ancient tradition, the holistic truth that had to be erased. Why was the story of a son a foundation for a new world, while the story of a daughter became a secret to be buried? The conflict began as the memory of the living teacher faded, and a new power began to rise in the West. As the decades bled into centuries, the architects of orthodoxy, the founders of the institutional church in Rome, sought to build an empire of belief. Their power depended on a single, controllable narrative. They needed a celestial king, an otherworldly savior whose authority could be channeled exclusively through them, a celibate all-male priesthood, a messiah with a family, a wife who was his equal, and a daughter who carried his sacred legacy, was a truth that could not be controlled. It suggested that divine authority was not conferred by an institution, but inherited through a bloodline, and that the feminine was an essential conduit for this power. This forgotten legacy was a direct threat to the foundations of their rising empire. The suppression was not a gentle fading into obscurity, it was a calculated fire, a systematic erasure of a truth deemed too dangerous to exist. At councils like Nicaea in the 4th century, a new history was forged. Gospels were selected, edited, and canonized, while others, those that spoke of the sacred feminine and of gnosis, were declared heresy and hunted down. The great libraries of Alexandria and beyond saw their scrolls put to the torch, and with them, the memory of a more balanced, embodied spirituality was turned to ash. Mary Magdalene, the apostle to the apostles, was recast, her identity deliberately distorted into that of a repentant prostitute, a narrative designed to sever her sacred connection to Jesus and strip her of all spiritual authority. If they were willing to erase a queen from history and turn her into a sinner, what more was erased in the shadows? This act of erasure carved a wound deep into the collective soul of humanity, creating a spiritual imbalance that has echoed through the ages. By severing the sacred from the earth and demonizing the feminine, a world was created that was taught to fear its own body, to distrust its intuition, and to seek salvation outside of itself. The legacy of this suppression is written in the witch hunts, in the subjugation of women, and in the profound sense of spiritual homelessness that haunts the modern world. We have been living within the architecture of a fragmented story, feeling the phantom limb of a truth that was amputated from our ancestral memory. Does this feeling of separation, this sense that something vital is missing, not echo in the quietest corners of our own lives, but a truth carried in blood cannot be burned away by the fires of empire? A memory encoded in the soul cannot be silenced by dogma. While the official histories were being written in ink, the real story was being carried in whispers, in oral traditions passed down through secret societies, and in the coded symbols of sacred art that would later flourish in Europe. The knowledge went underground, becoming a hidden stream flowing beneath the monolithic structure of the new religion. Legend holds that as the danger grew in Judea, a small, rudderless boat was cast upon the sea. On board was a mother and a child, the carriers of the sacred bloodline, leaving the land of their birth to find refuge on a distant shore. They were escaping not just persecution, but oblivion. How does a truth survive when the entire world is built upon its denial? It becomes a mystery, waiting for the moment of its revelation. The shores of Gaul, a land that would one day be called France, received them not with fanfare, but with the quiet embrace of salt marsh and wind-swept sand. Legend holds that the rudderless boat carried not only the sacred mother and child, but the very seed of a new world, a knowledge that could not be entrusted to ink and parchment. This truth was not to be written, it was to be lived, breathed, and woven into the very soul of the land. It became an oral tradition, a whispered chronicle passed from one generation to the next, a sacred current flowing beneath the surface of official history. This is the first and most enduring proof, a story that survived, not in a library, but in the hearts of a people. In the Camargue region today, the Romani people gather every year to celebrate their patron saint, Sara-la-Kâli, Sara the Black. They carry her statue to the sea in a ritual that reenacts her arrival. Who is this mysterious black saint, and why does their ancestral memory insist she came from the Holy Land? The official church has no clear answer, but the people know. They are the living library, the keepers of a memory that empires tried and failed to erase. This hidden knowledge did not only survive in spoken word, it was encoded in stone and wood, waiting silently in the shadows of the very cathedrals built to supplant it. Across southern France and beyond, a network of mysterious statues emerged. The Black Madonnas. These are not the pale, serene queens of heaven depicted in Renaissance art. They are ancient, dark, and throned in sovereign power, their faces imbued with a primal wisdom that feels far older than Christianity itself. The official explanation often cites the age of the wood or the smoke from votive candles, but this fails to explain their deliberate and consistent darkness, a feature that connects them to far older earth goddesses like Isis and Cybele. But what if these statues were never meant to represent the mother of the Nazarene? What if they were a coded tribute to the other Mary, the Magdalene, and the sacred child she brought to these shores? They are icons of the suppressed feminine, of a divinity grounded in the earth, and of a royal lineage that was dark-skinned, hailing from the sun-drenched lands of Judea and Egypt. Each Black Madonna is a silent testament, a map marker pointing back to a forgotten queen and her princess, Sara. As centuries passed, this underground stream of knowledge nourished a unique spiritual culture in the Languedoc region of southern France. Here, a people known as the Cathars flourished. They called themselves the Pure Ones, and their beliefs stood in stark opposition to the doctrines of Rome. They believed in gnosis, in direct experience of the divine, and they revered the feminine principle as an equal part of God. They did not worship in opulent cathedrals, but in nature, and they held a secret so profound that the church in Rome saw them as the greatest threat to its existence. The Cathars were rumored to be the guardians of the Holy Grail, but they knew the Grail was not a cup, it was a bloodline. They were the protectors of the legacy of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, the secret lineage of Sarah. The ferocity with which they were hunted and destroyed in the Albigensian Crusade speaks volumes. Entire cities were put to the sword. Their final stand at the fortress of Montségur was not just the end of a people, it was a desperate, violent attempt by the system to extinguish this sacred memory once and for all. Why would an entire people be annihilated with such ferocity unless they protected a truth so profound it could undo an empire? While the oral traditions and coded symbols thrived in Europe, their textual origins lay buried in the sands of Egypt, silenced for over a millennium and a half. These were the Gnostic Gospels, the scriptures that told the other side of the story. The Gospel of Philip speaks of Mary Magdalene not as a follower, but as the koinonos, the companion, the spiritual partner whom the Master loved more than all the other disciples and would often kiss. The Gospel of Mary portrays her as the apostle to the apostles, the one entrusted with the most secret and elevated teachings after the resurrection, a revelation the male disciples themselves could not comprehend. These texts are not mere footnotes to history. They are the written echo of the sacred union, the intellectual and spiritual proof that confirms what the oral traditions always knew. They describe a spirituality of balance, of wholeness, and of a divine feminine principle so central that her erasure became the cornerstone of the new Orthodox religion. These were the words they tried to burn, the truth they tried to bury. Then, in 1945, in a moment of cosmic synchronicity, as the world was emerging from the ashes of a global war, a peasant farmer digging for fertilizer near the town of Nag Hammadi in Egypt struck a clay jar with his spade. Inside, he found a collection of 13 leather-bound codices hidden away since the 4th century to protect them from the book-burning purges of the early church. For the first time, in 1600 years, the suppressed Gospels saw the light of day. This was not a legend or a coded symbol. This was tangible, undeniable proof. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi library was the turning point, the moment the long silence was irrevocably broken. The ink that had dried 16 centuries ago began to speak again, confirming the exalted role of Mary Magdalene and validating the Gnostic worldview that had been so brutally suppressed. It was as if the earth itself could no longer hold the secret. Why now? Why have these texts returned to the light in our time, at this precise moment in human history? The evidence, you see, is not a single, isolated artifact. It is a constellation of light, a convergence of proofs that together illuminate a profound and coherent truth. It is the living memory of the Romani people and their dark-skinned saint. It is the silent, wooden gaze of hundreds of Black Madonnas hidden in plain sight. It is the heroic sacrifice of the Cathars who chose obliteration over the betrayal of their sacred knowledge, and it is the rediscovered words of the ancient Gospels emerging from the desert sand like a message in a bottle that has finally found its shore. These are not separate stories. They are chapters of the same hidden chronicle, the legacy of a sacred child and the truth she embodied. This knowledge has survived fires, crusades, and centuries of calculated silence. It has endured because it is more than history. It is a memory that lives within the land, within our symbols, and deep within our own ancestral soul. The question is no longer whether this knowledge exists. The question is, what does it awaken within you to know that it has finally returned? This is where the trail of historical evidence dissolves into the landscape of the soul. The fragments we have uncovered, the whispers of the Romani, the gaze of the Black Madonna, the ashes of Montségur, and the resurrected words from the desert sand, are not merely clues in an ancient detective story. They are mirrors. Each piece reflects a part of ourselves that has been dormant, a chamber of the heart that has been sealed for centuries. This hidden knowledge returns now not to rewrite a book of history, but to rewrite the very understanding of who we are. It rises from the depths, not as an intellectual curiosity, but as a spiritual imperative. The story of Sara is not about a princess who lived 2,000 years ago. It is about the return of a sovereign power within every human soul, a power that was deliberately and systematically exiled from our world. Have you ever felt it? A quiet but persistent sense of incompletion, as if you were living in a magnificent temple with one of its most sacred chambers locked and forgotten. A feeling that the stories you were given about God, about spirit, and about yourself were somehow missing a vital chapter. This is the echo of the great erasure. This is the phantom limb of the sacred feminine, a presence so essential to our wholeness that even after 2 millennia of silence, our souls still ache from its absence. The suppression of Sarah's lineage was not just the removal of a person from the historical record, it was the removal of a fundamental principle from our consciousness. It taught us that spirit and flesh are at war, that the sacred is not to be found in the embrace of a partner or the birth of a child, but only in renunciation and transcendence. What truth within you has been exiled? Because you were taught it was not holy enough? This act of separation created a fractured world, a civilization built upon a profound imbalance. It gave us a sky god without an earth mother, a divine son without a divine daughter, a spirituality of the mind that feared the wisdom of the body. In exiling the Magdalene and her child, the architects of the new order exiled intuition, sacred emotion, and the cyclical wisdom of nature. They created a kingdom with a missing queen, and in her place, they built walls of dogma and doctrines of control. We have been living in the shadow of those walls ever since, taught to seek validation from external authorities, while the deepest source of gnosis, the direct knowing of the divine, lay dormant within us. The return of this lost knowledge is the first ray of dawn to crest over those ancient walls, promising not a new religion, but a return to wholeness. Sara, the child born of the sacred union, is the living antidote to this separation. She is the embodiment of the truth that was too dangerous for an empire of control to tolerate, that heaven and earth are meant to be one. Her very existence is a testament that the divine is not an abstract force to be worshipped from afar, but a living, breathing current that flows through blood and bone, through love and lineage, through the sacred vessel of the feminine body. She represents the forgotten key to our own wholeness, the understanding that we are not fallen creatures yearning for a distant salvation, but divine beings having a human experience. Her legacy is the radical and beautiful assertion that this world, this life, and this body are not prisons to be escaped, but temples to be honored. The weight of this revelation grows heavier when we consider how fiercely it was protected. This knowledge did not survive by accident. It was carried like a fragile flame through a storm that lasted for centuries. The Cathars, the pure ones, were not simply believers in a different doctrine. They were guardians of a living memory. When they walked into the flames at Montségur, they were not just martyrs for a belief. They were librarians burning their own library to keep its most sacred scroll from falling into the hands of those who would defile it. They understood that this truth, the truth of the sacred bloodline and the divine feminine, was more precious than their own lives. Their sacrifice created a seal of silence around the mystery, a silence that has held for 700 years, waiting for a generation with the courage to break it. What does it awaken in you to know that people chose annihilation over the betrayal of this memory? And now, the intensity of this returning truth begins to clarify. The Sangral, the Holy Grail, was never a cup. The ancient texts and legends were clear. It was the sang real, the royal blood. But this, too, is a metaphor for an even deeper mystery. The bloodline is not merely a genetic marker passed from parent to child. It is a current of consciousness, a stream of gnostic light that carries the memory of our divine origins. This sacred lineage does not belong to one family, one people, or one historical narrative. It flows within all of humanity. It is the ancestral memory encoded in our very being. The divine spark that the Gnostics knew was the true identity of every soul. The story of Sarah is the story of an external historical lineage that serves as a key to unlock the internal spiritual lineage that is our own birthright. The silence is breaking because the wound of our separation has become unbearable. The world built on imbalance is now teetering on the edge of its own contradictions. The return of this knowledge is not a coincidence. It is a cosmic intervention, a lifeline thrown to a humanity that has forgotten its own sacred nature. The whispers are becoming a chorus, and the resonance is growing stronger with every soul that awakens to this truth. We are approaching a point of no return, a moment where the suppressed memory will flood the collective consciousness. But this is not the end of the mystery. It is merely the opening of a door. For the return of Sarah's story was not just meant to heal the past. It was meant to unlock something far older, a code hidden within our deepest spiritual memory, waiting for this exact moment to be activated. Are you prepared to discover what lies beyond that door? For centuries, the truth of the sacred feminine lineage remained a ghost story, a current of energy felt but not seen, a melody heard only in the deepest silences of the soul. It was a truth preserved in the amber of oral tradition, in the dark wood of forgotten statues, and in the ashes of martyred saints. It was a powerful but intangible legacy, easy for the architects of orthodoxy to dismiss as folklore, as the fanciful heresy of the uneducated. The system had built its fortress of dogma on a foundation of silence, confident that the evidence of its greatest lie had been turned to dust long ago. The world, wounded and weary from centuries of spiritual imbalance, was taught to accept the story it was given. But the earth itself remembers. And in the middle of the 20th century, as humanity was emerging from the shadow of a global war, the desert decided it was time to speak. The year was 1945. Near the town of Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt, a local farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman was digging for sabak, a soft soil used as fertilizer, near the base of the towering Jabal al-Tarif cliffs. His spade struck something hard, not a stone, but something that gave way with a hollow crack. Brushing away the sand, he unearthed a large, sealed, reddish earthenware jar. His first thought was of gold, but a lifetime of stories about jinn and spirits trapped in ancient vessels made him hesitate. After breaking the jar, he found not treasure, but something infinitely more precious. Inside were 13 leather-bound papyrus codices, books that had been sealed, a way in the 4th century to protect them from the purges of an ascendant orthodoxy. For 1600 years, they had slept in the earth, waiting. In that moment, with the simple act of a farmer's spade, the long silence was irrevocably shattered. This was the point of no return. This was the revelation that changed everything. The ink that had slept for 16 centuries began to speak again, and its voice was a thunderclap that echoed through the halls of history. These were not forgeries or later interpretations. They were the authentic voices of the Gnostics, the keepers of the other way. Within these pages, Mary Magdalene was not the repentant sinner of dogma, but the enlightened companion, the one Christ loved more than all the others, the apostle to the apostles to whom he entrusted his most profound and secret teachings. The Gospel of Philip confirmed her status as the koinonos, the partner. The Gospel of Mary described her visionary wisdom, a gnosis so advanced that the male disciples could not comprehend it. The legend was no longer a legend. The whispers now had a voice. The system's greatest fear had been realized. The truth had not been burned, it had only been buried. The consequences of this discovery rippled outwards, not just through academia, but through the collective consciousness of the world. It was a spiritual earthquake. The foundations of the carefully constructed narrative began to crack. For the first time, seekers and mystics had tangible, textual proof that the story they had been sold was incomplete, that a vital and beautiful truth had been deliberately excised. The Nag Hammadi library became the Rosetta Stone for the entire mystery. Suddenly, the oral traditions of the Romani people and their dark-skinned saint were not just folktales, but echoes of a verifiable history. The enigmatic gaze of the Black Madonnas was no longer a mystery, but a clear and coded tribute to the exiled queen and her sacred child. The horrific crusade against the Cathars was reframed, their sacrifice no longer a footnote in a religious war, but the ultimate act of guardianship for a truth that was now, finally, returning to the light. This convergence of evidence creates a picture so coherent, so powerful, that it can no longer be ignored. It is a constellation of proof, with each star lending its light to the others. The living memory of the people, the silent testimony of the statues, the heroic sacrifice of the guardians. And now, the resurrected words from the desert sand, they all tell the same story. They speak of a sacred union, a holy child, and a lineage of light that was forced into the shadows. This hidden knowledge survived because it is essential. It is the missing half of our spiritual story, the key to restoring a balance that was lost. The question that hangs in the air, heavy with the weight of centuries, is no longer whether this truth existed. The question becomes, why is it returning now? What is it that our time, our generation, is being called upon to understand? The answer to that question takes us deeper, beyond the realm of historical fact, and into the heart of the spiritual mystery itself. The rediscovery of these texts was not an accident of archaeology. It was an act of planetary memory, a sign that humanity is ready to reclaim its own wholeness. The story of Sara and the sacred bloodline is not just about them. It is about us. The Sangreal, the royal blood, is more than a physical lineage. It is a metaphor for the divine consciousness, the gnostic light, that flows within every human soul. It is our shared ancestral memory of a time when we knew we were divine, before a system taught us to believe we were fallen. Reclaiming this story is the act of reclaiming our own inner sovereignty, of remembering the sacred union of masculine and feminine, spirit and flesh that exists within each of us. The discovery at Nag Hammadi, therefore, was not the end of the mystery. It was the opening of a gate. It proved that a vast library of sacred knowledge had been suppressed, but it also hinted at something more. It revealed that the Gnostics were masters of esoteric symbolism, that their words often held multiple layers of meaning. The texts speak of the bridal chamber, of divine union, and of a secret wisdom passed from mouth to ear. They confirmed the existence of a sacred lineage. But what if that lineage was a key to unlocking an even greater secret? What if the story, of Sara was not the ultimate prize, but the map that leads to it. The Cathars, it was said, protected the Grail. But on the night before their fortress of Montségur fell, 4 of their perfecti were lowered down the treacherous cliff walls, carrying with them, as the legend says, the treasure. It was not gold or jewels. It was something far more important. The Nag Hammadi texts tell us what was lost, but the sacrifice of the Cathars whispers of something that was saved. And that is where our journey must go next. What was the treasure they rescued from the flames? We stand now at the precipice of the final revelation, in the shadow of the smoking ruins of Montségur. For 7 centuries, a question has haunted the silence left by the flames. What was the treasure that the 4 perfecti rescued from the fire? It was not gold, nor a crown, nor even a sacred text. The treasure they carried into the night was a frequency. It was a state of consciousness, a living gnosis that could not be captured in ink or stone. It was the direct experiential knowledge of the sacred union within, the key to unlocking the divine potential that lies dormant in every human soul. The story of Sara, the rediscovered Gospels, the coded symbols, all of it was a map, a carefully preserved pathway leading not to a historical artifact, but back to the source of divinity within ourselves. This is the ultimate secret the Cathars died to protect. The Holy Grail was never an object to be found, but a state of being to be remembered. The revelation of the sang real, the royal blood, was never meant to establish a new earthly dynasty or a single chosen family. That is the language of empire, the very system that sought to suppress this truth. The Gnostics, the keepers of this ancient wisdom, understood that the bloodline was a sacred metaphor. It is the current of living light, the stream of divine consciousness that flows not just through one lineage, but through all of humanity. Sara is the historical anchor, the key that turns the lock, but the door she opens leads into the temple of your own being. You are the forgotten legacy. The royal blood flows within your own veins. This ancestral memory is your birthright, a sacred inheritance that has been waiting patiently for you to claim it. The entire 2,000-year mystery, the crusades, the fires, and the long silence all converge on this single, breathtaking point. The kingdom of heaven is not in a distant land or a future time. It is within you. This is where the ancient knowledge ceases to be a story and becomes a path of profound personal transformation. The erasure of Sara and the divine feminine from our history created a deep wound, not just in our world, but in our own souls. We were taught to live in a state of inner exile, with our logic warring against our intuition, our ambition suppressing our compassion, our spirit feeling disconnected from our bodies. To reclaim the story of Sara is to begin the sacred work of healing this inner divide. It is an invitation to unlock the sealed chambers of your own heart, to welcome back the exiled queen, the intuitive wisdom, the creative power, and the embodied love that is your true nature. This awakening is the sacred marriage taking place within. What changes when you stop seeking validation from the outside world and start listening to the divine voice that has been whispering your name from within all along? When we undertake this inner work, the healing does not stop with us. A world built on the foundation of a fragmented story is a world of imbalance, conflict, and separation. We see it in the exploitation of the earth, in the systems of control and domination, and in the profound spiritual hunger that haunts our modern age. By restoring the sacred feminine to her rightful place within our own consciousness, we become living conduits for a more balanced reality. Each soul that awakens to this wholeness adds its light to a growing dawn that is pushing back the long night of separation. This is not a passive belief, it is an active co-creation. The forgotten legacy of Sara is, in its essence, a blueprint for a new earth. one where divinity is recognized in all beings, where spirit and nature dance in harmony, and where power is expressed not as control, but as love. And so, the journey through this hidden history brings us full circle back to the quiet center of our own being. We began with a name torn from the pages of history, and we have arrived at a truth that is written on the fabric of our own souls. The mystery of the sacred bloodline is not a puzzle to be solved, but a reality to be lived. It is the recognition that you are not a fallen creature seeking a distant salvation, but a divine being remembering its own sovereignty. This hidden knowledge returns to us now in this critical moment of human history, because we are finally ready to hear it. We are ready to stop looking for saviors and to start recognizing the divine light that shines from within. This revelation is not an end, but a profound and beautiful beginning. The remembering has only just started, and the path forward is illuminated by the light of this reclaimed truth. The greatest mystery was never about what was hidden from us, but about what was hidden inside of us. Now that this door has been opened, a final question remains, one that only you can answer. What changes within you now that you know the Holy Grail is not an object to be found, but a divine lineage to be awakened within yourself? If this journey into our forgotten legacy has stirred the ancestral memory within your soul, help us to continue shining this light. Subscribe to our channel and share this message with those whose hearts are open to the remembering. Your consciousness is the most vital part of this global awakening. For the ultimate truth, the one that empires feared and saints protected, is simple. You are infinitely more sacred and powerful than you have ever been told, and your awakening is the key to healing our world.